My name is Meredith Langston, and the night my son brought her home was the night my whole world cracked down the middle with no warning, no preparation, and no way to unsee what I saw. You might actually regret missing out on this dramatic story. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. He was so proud like only a man in love could be. He called me earlier that day, told me he had a surprise. I thought maybe it was a promotion or he was finally ready to move out of that noisy apartment above the bakery. But then I heard it in his voice. That softness. That tremble you only get when your heart is more full than your hands can hold. She's amazing, Mom. I want you to meet her. Tonight. I agreed, of course. How could I say no? He was 32 and cautious. He hadn't brought many girls home. And those he did well, they didn't leave much of an impression. But when I opened the door and saw her, I stopped breathing. She stood there in a wine-colored blouse, hair the color of summer bark after rain. Not just the hue, but the texture. Wavy and soft, a little untamed, like she didn't care to control it. Her eyes were green, not sharp like a knife, but smooth like a hillside, just like mine when I was her age. I could barely speak. Something inside me, some ancient reflex, reached up into my throat and squeezed. She smiled politely. Hi, I'm Layla. Layla. Even the name felt familiar, like a page from a chapter I had closed but never truly finished. My son Drew beamed like a fool. Layla, this is my mom, Meredith. Mom, Layla. I extended a hand that trembled only slightly. Her grip was soft, hesitant. Her eyes studied me for just a flicker too long. She smelled like wild jasmine. Inside I played hostess, poured wine, set out the roast chicken I'd made, asked the usual questions. Where she was from a few towns over, what she did, photography weddings. Mostly how long they'd been seeing each other, 6 months. But every time she laughed, it cracked something deeper open in me. I couldn't explain it then. All I knew was that I had heard that laugh before. Not in a dream, not in a memory. Somewhere real, somewhere buried. Midway through dinner, Drew got up to take a call. Something about a rescheduled meeting. He left the room, and silence filled the space he vacated. Layla looked around the dining room. Your house is warm, she said. Safe. That word, safe. I swallowed hard. Thank you. It's just me here now. She nodded. Me too. Just me. Always has been. There was something in her tone, something fragile but not broken. I saw myself in her posture, in the way she held her fork, in the subtle way she scanned a room before relaxing into it. And then I saw it. As she reached to pour more wine, the cuff of her blouse lifted slightly, and there it was, a small crescent birthmark right above the inside of her wrist. No, it couldn't be. That birthmark, tiny, distinct, pale, had once rested on the forearm of the baby girl I gave up 30 years ago. The baby I hadn't held for longer than 5 minutes. The baby I'd named Eva. The baby I never stopped dreaming about. I felt the room spin. My wine glass trembled in my hand, and I spilled a few drops onto the table. Layla noticed. Are you okay? I'm fine. I lied, dabbing at the spill with a napkin. Drew returned and the moment passed. But I was no longer in that room, not fully. I was back in that hospital bed, age 28, alone and terrified and full of shame. I was watching the nurse carry her away in a pink blanket. I was whispering, I'm sorry, to no one. And now, 30 years later, she was sitting at my dinner table dating my son, and smiling at me like we'd only just met. I didn't sleep that night. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually comforted me, but tonight it throbbed like an open wound. The tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway sounded like a countdown, like something was running out and I couldn't stop it. I sat in my reading chair with the photo box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were scraps of a life I had tried to let go of. Hospital forms, ultrasound photos, a tiny pink sock, and the letter, the one I wrote but never sent. The adoption was closed. I had no right to reach out. That's what the papers said. No right to interfere with the child's new life. But I had written to her anyway. Not to interfere, just to say I loved you even then. Even when I walked away. And now she might be here. Not only here, but wrapped in the arms of my only son. I wanted to scream. To run, to scrub the possibility from my mind. But the image of that birthmark, that little crescent moon, it wouldn't let go. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I called the agency. They didn't have much for me. "The file is sealed," the woman on the phone said flatly. "Even if she found you, unless she submitted a formal inquiry, we cannot confirm or deny any connection." I hung up feeling more hollow than before, but I couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, I watched her closely. Layla came over often, sometimes with Drew, sometimes alone helping me with the garden or cooking or sorting books in the attic. She was kind, thoughtful. She always lingered in each room as if trying to memorize it. I caught her once staring at the family photos on the mantel. She smiled, then looked away too quickly. There was a photo there of me in my 20s, right before I got pregnant, right before everything changed. And then it happened. She came over one afternoon while Drew was out. I was folding laundry. She offered to help. We chatted idly, and as she reached for a pillowcase, she paused. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. I nodded, heartbeat suddenly uneven. "Did you ever lose someone? Like really lose them? Not to death, but to life." The words hit like a fist to the chest. I looked at her. Her eyes were glistening. "I don't know why I asked that," she said quickly. "Sorry. Forget it." But I couldn't forget it. I wouldn't. Something had to give. That night, I went digging. Not in drawers in memory. There was a name, a nurse's name, one who had held my hand during the worst of it. Her name was Jolene. I remembered because she had bright red nails and sang softly as she adjusted my IV. She told me once that she had stayed in the same city her whole life. I found her. She was retired now, but still in the phone book. I called not expecting much, but she remembered me. Remembered the baby girl. She had green eyes, Jolene said softly. And that little birthmark, it looked like the moon, didn't it? I nearly dropped the phone. "Yes," I whispered. "Do you know what happened to her?" There was a pause. "I wasn't supposed to, but I peeked once." Years later, she was adopted by a woman named Brenda Callahan. Photographer. They lived in Meadowbrook. My breath caught. Layla had told me she grew up in Meadowbrook. And her mother, also a photographer, one who died in a car crash when Layla was 16. No siblings, no other family, just her. I hung up the phone and stared at the walls, unable to cry. There was no room for tears. Only awe, dread, and a twisting kind of joy that couldn't find its footing. She was mine, my daughter, and she was dating her half-brother. I began to count the moments I had with her, not as my son's girlfriend, but as the daughter I never got to raise. The way she scrunched her nose when she laughed just like I used to. The way she absent-mindedly hummed when she concentrated. The way she always double-checked that the stove was off before leaving the kitchen. Something I've done since I nearly burned down my dorm room in college. She was my mirror, and I was a coward. I didn't tell Drew. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed time to understand how this had happened. How the world so vast and cruel and unpredictable could twist fate so tightly that a mother and daughter could collide like this with neither of them knowing the truth. I researched adoption ethics, DNA testing, psychological effects of truth revealed too late. But none of it prepared me for what happened next. One evening, Layla came over alone. Drew was out of town for a work retreat. I was in the living room with a pile of old albums. She joined me, curious, her fingertips dancing over the cracked leather covers. "May I?" she asked. I nodded, heart in my throat. She flipped through page after page. Birthdays, vacations, baby Drew in a lion costume, me holding him with a smile far more tired than I remembered. Then she paused. She turned the album back a page. "That's you," she said, pointing to a photo. It was me, age 24, standing on a beach in a loose white dress, hair wild in the wind, hand on a stomach that wasn't yet obvious. "Yes," I replied quietly. "I was pregnant then." She stared at it for a long time. "I always wondered," she whispered, "about my birth mother." My breath caught. "I was adopted," she added. "When I was a baby, my mom, the one who raised me, Brenda, she was amazing. But she always said I came with a whole story she didn't have access to." I couldn't speak, couldn't blink, couldn't move. I used to wonder if she ever thought about me. Layla continued. My real mom. If she missed me, or if I was just erased. I turned to her slowly. She was so close. Her face was open, vulnerable. I reached out and touched her hand. She thought about you, I whispered. Every single day. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. Why did you say that? Like you knew. Silence. That long aching kind. I had no plan, no script. I had only a truth that was burning through my chest, desperate to be let out. I think I do, I said. No. And then I told her. Everything. The pregnancy. The shame. The decision to give her up. The crescent birthmark. The phone call to Jolene. The way I'd known the moment I saw her that something deep and sacred had snapped back into place. She sat frozen. At first I thought she'd cry, or scream, or walk out. Instead, she whispered one word. No. Then again. Firmer. No, that can't be. That's not possible. I didn't want to believe it either, I said. But you told me your story, and it matches mine in ways I can't ignore. But Drew, she said suddenly, standing up. Drew and I. She couldn't finish. I stood too, my own heart collapsing inside me. You didn't know. Neither of you knew. She turned away, arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was trying to keep from falling apart. I took a step forward, then stopped. Layla, I didn't tell you this to ruin your life. I told you because the truth matters. Because you matter. She didn't answer, just stood there trembling. And then she left. No goodbye. No promise to call. Just silence. I stood in that living room for hours after she left, staring at the photo of myself pregnant on the beach. The wind blowing. The sun hiding behind clouds. A younger version of me full of hope and regret. And the knowledge that some waves, no matter how far they travel, eventually find their way back to shore. The next 2 days were unbearable. No calls, no texts, no knocks on the door. Layla vanished like a dream I'd been jolted awake from. The kind that lingers behind your eyelids and leaves your chest heavy with meaning you can't quite hold. I didn't call her. I didn't even try. She needed space. Time to breathe, to scream, to collapse without anyone watching. And maybe time to hate me. But it wasn't just her silence that haunted me. It was Drew's presence. He returned from his retreat cheerful and energized, unaware that the center of our world had cracked open. He asked about Layla, assuming she was just busy, and I forced smiles like paper masks. Everything okay? He asked at dinner, sipping wine with the ease of someone who didn't know he was standing at the edge of a cliff. I nodded. Lead. Betrayed him. Because how do you tell your son that the girl he loves is his sister? You don't. Not when the truth could shatter him. You wait. Or at least you try to. 3 nights after she left, I found Layla sitting on the steps of my front porch. It was nearly midnight. Her hoodie was pulled up, and her hands were buried in her sleeves like a child. I opened the door slowly. She didn't look at me. Hey, she said quietly. My throat tightened. Come inside. We sat on the couch in the dark. Only the glow from the street lamp lit her face. Pale, puffy-eyed, exhausted. I didn't tell him, she said first. I couldn't. I nodded. Neither did I. I don't know what to feel, she admitted. I feel sick. I feel furious. But I also feel sad. Not just about Drew, about everything. She looked at me. Why did you give me up? The question I'd dreaded. I was 24, I said slowly. Single. Broke. My parents were devout and ashamed. The father was long gone. They pressured me into it. I wasn't strong enough to fight them. And when I finally realized what I'd lost, you were already gone. Layla wiped her nose. I used to fantasize about finding my real mom. But in those fantasies, she was always perfect. I'm not, I whispered. She gave a dry laugh. No kidding. We sat in silence. That tense, suspended space where forgiveness and fury wait their turn. Then she said I had a necklace when I was little. It had a crescent moon on it. My mom Brenda said it was the only thing in the box when she adopted me. No note. Just the necklace. I stared. My heart thundered. I gave it to the agency, I said, as a keepsake. I didn't think they'd keep it. They did, she said softly. I wore it until the chain broke. Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced them back. So now what? She asked. I don't know. She looked at me. Really looked. Can I ask one more thing? I nodded. If we hadn't figured this out, if I had married Drew, would you have told me? The question sliced me open. I didn't answer right away. Then, yes, I would have told you, even if it destroyed us all. She looked down. Then slowly she reached across the couch and took my hand. I'm still angry, she said, and I'm still confused. But I'm glad I know. I squeezed her fingers. Me too. We didn't speak after that. Just sat there. Two women, mother and daughter, reunited by an impossible accident, and still unsure of the ending. But for the first time in my life, I had her hand in mine. And for that, I was grateful. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in slow, aching waves. Layla and Drew stopped seeing each other, but not because they knew the truth. Not yet. She told him she needed time for herself, that she had to figure out who she was outside of them. He was devastated. He moped around the house, watched old movies they'd seen together, and checked his phone like a reflex. Every time it buzzed, hope flashed in his eyes, then died. Again and again. And I carried the weight of knowing why. I watched my son fall apart from a truth he wasn't allowed to have yet. Layla and I began to talk not every day, but enough. There were long drives, coffee shop meetings, late-night phone calls that stretched until our throats were dry. At first we avoided Drew. The topic was a cracked mirror we didn't dare touch. But eventually she asked, how do we tell him? It wasn't should we, it was how. And I had no answer. He deserved to know. That was never the question. But the way it would break him, that was the nightmare. I remember the night it finally happened. Layla came over. She wore a soft blue sweater and that crescent moon necklace. I'd had it fixed for her, the only thing I still had left from the box. I'd begged the agency to pass on. When she walked in, Drew's face lit up like spring had finally come. Layla, he said, half standing hopeful. She nodded and gave a small, sad smile. I need to talk to both of you, she said. I knew. I offered to get water, tea, any distraction, but she shook her head. Stay. We sat in the living room, Layla between us, wringing her fingers. Drew with brows furrowed. Me already bracing for the sound of a world breaking. She took a breath. I found something out. About my past. Drew nodded slowly, cautiously. I'm adopted, she said. And recently I found out who my biological mother is. His brows lifted. That's amazing. Who is she? And that's when she looked at me. He followed her gaze. Confusion washed over him like a slow tide. What? He whispered. Silence. Then louder. What? She nodded once, then whispered. It's Meredith. He stared at me. I didn't move. Couldn't. He laughed short, sharp. That's not funny. No, I said, finally finding my voice. It's not. His face went blank. Then pale. Then red. No. No, this is insane, he muttered. There's no way. There's no way. I reached for him. Drew, but he stood up, flinching. You knew. I nodded. Not at first, but I figured it out. The agency, the timing, the birthmark. He backed away, shaking. And you just, what? Let us date. Let me fall in love with my sister. Tears burned my eyes. I didn't know when you met, and when I did know, I couldn't unknow it. Layla stood too, her voice cracking. Neither of us knew Drew. Please don't punish us for something we didn't ask for. He stared at us, betrayed. You're my mother, he spat. You should have protected me from this. I tried, I whispered. No, he snapped. You tried to hide it. Then he turned and walked out the front door. The slam echoed like a shot, and all I could do was collapse into Layla's arms, the daughter I found too late, the son I might have lost forever. In the end, I couldn't protect either of them. I could only pray the truth would be enough to set us free, even if it shattered us first. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Drew didn't come home. His room remained untouched, the bed still unmade, his shoes by the door like he might return any second. I left the porch light on at night the way I used to when he missed curfew as a teenager. Only this time I wasn't angry, I was terrified. Layla checked in every day, but her voice was quieter now, almost apologetic, like she blamed herself for everything. I reassured her over and over that this wasn't her fault, that if anyone had failed, it was me. But it didn't ease the weight. On the third night, I heard his car pull into the driveway. I sat frozen on the couch, a cup of untouched tea cooling in my hands. When the door opened, he didn't look at me. He walked straight to the kitchen, opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, then leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes on the floor. "I stayed at Matt's," he said flatly. I nodded. I figured silence. Then he asked, "Did you ever think about telling me before she walked into our lives?" I took a breath. Yes, 1,000 times. But I didn't know how. I didn't even know if I should. "You were happy." "That's not an excuse," he snapped. "You let me love her. You let me believe." I didn't let anything, I said firmly. "I was trying to figure out how to tell you without breaking you," he scoffed. "Too late." I stood then, finally meeting his eyes. "I made a mistake. 1,000 of them, maybe. But I didn't do this to you. Life did. Fate. Whatever cruel god thought this would be funny." He looked away. "I love her," he whispered. "I know," I said. "And that's what makes this hurt so much." "But you didn't do anything wrong?" "Neither of you did." He exhaled shakily. "What do I do now?" "I don't know," I said. "But I think maybe it starts with forgiving yourself, and then forgiving me." His eyes filled, but he blinked them clear. "I need time," he said finally. "I understand." He turned toward the stairs but paused halfway. "You said you gave her up because you thought it was best for her." "Yes." "Was it?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know." He nodded once, just once, then disappeared up the stairs. Later that night, I found him asleep in his bed, his arm thrown over his eyes like when he was a boy, and the nightmares were too much. I didn't wake him, just watched him breathe. And for the first time since this all began, I allowed myself to hope. Because he was home, because he knew, and because despite it all, he hadn't walked away forever. 3 weeks passed. They didn't speak. Layla stayed away. Drew kept his distance. The air between them, once electric with laughter and casual intimacy, now felt radioactive. Neither one of them knew how to dismantle what they'd unknowingly built. And I was the silent bridge between two broken hearts, unsure if it was even safe to cross. Drew began to talk to me again, quietly, warily, like someone petting a wounded animal. He didn't bring up Layla. Neither did I. Instead, we cooked together, watched reruns of old comedies, took walks around the neighborhood like we used to when he was younger, and thought I had all the answers. One night, as we folded laundry, he asked, "Did she always know she was adopted?" "Yes," I replied. "Her parents were open about it. But they didn't know who I was either. It was a closed adoption." He nodded. "And she found you." "How?" "She was volunteering at the hospital. She saw my name, said it sparked something. She'd remembered the name from her original file. Then she did some digging, matched timelines, old photos. It all came together." He sat still for a moment, towel clenched in his hands. Then, "Is it wrong that I still miss her? Even knowing?" "No," I said gently. "Your love wasn't fake. It was built on what you knew, and it was real." He exhaled long and low. "It's just, I keep replaying things in my head. What I said, what we did, what we almost became." "I know," I whispered. The next day, he left a letter on the kitchen table. It was for Layla. I didn't read it, but I saw the smudge of a fingerprint where a tear had landed. And I saw her name written in his handwriting, careful, straight, steady. "I called her that afternoon." "He wrote to you," I said. "He wants you to read it." She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Okay." They met in the park, neutral ground. I didn't go with her. This was their moment, not mine. When she came back, her face was unreadable. She sat down across from me at the table and whispered, "He said he forgave me." My throat tightened. "And he said he's working on forgiving you." Tears pricked my eyes. She continued, "He said, part of him will always love me, but in a different way now. A protected way." "That makes sense," I said. Then she added, "And he wants me to stay in town." I looked up. "To stay?" She nodded. "As a sister? As a daughter? If I want that." My breath caught. "And do you?" She smiled, small, fragile, but real. "I think I do." And in that moment, I felt something shift. The grief didn't vanish. The pain didn't evaporate. But the hope, it rooted itself, deep and real, like family does even in the strangest soil. That spring, the house felt different. Not fixed, not quite, but healing. The kind of healing that doesn't come with balloons or apologies, but with quiet mornings and effort. Drew still tiptoed around certain subjects. Layla was gentle in her presence, never pushing. And I learned how to sit in the discomfort of what we couldn't change. We began having dinner together again, the three of us. Once a week. At first, it was awkward. The silence during those meals was full of unspoken questions and haunted glances. But then over lasagna or grilled salmon or takeout Thai, someone would say something funny, and we'd laugh, tentatively, then freely. It was like we were building something new on the ashes of something unthinkable. One Sunday, Layla arrived early. She had a small wooden box in her hand, the kind you find in antique stores or tucked away in forgotten drawers. She placed it on the table. "I want to show you both something." Drew raised a brow but said nothing. She opened the box. Inside were photos, faded fragile. One of a baby girl wrapped in a yellow knit blanket. One of me, much younger, holding a tulip at the hospital courtyard. And one of Layla, maybe 5 or 6, standing between her adoptive parents with a wary smile and a paper crown. "These are the only things I have from that time," she said. "And now I want to add more." She pulled out a Polaroid camera and held it up. "Let's take one. Of us. Today." Drew hesitated. So did I. But eventually he nodded. We stood on the porch. The light soft and golden. The trees behind us blooming in pinks and whites. Layla counted 1, 2. Click. The photo slid out. She waved it, then handed it to me as the image slowly formed. Us. Awkward. Smiling. Together. "I want to put this in the box," she said. "With the others." I held it like it was made of glass. "You're sure?" She nodded. "This isn't about erasing the past. It's about making room for a better version of it." Later that night, after Layla had gone, Drew sat next to me on the couch. "She's brave," he said. Yes, I agreed. She always was. He looked down at his hands. "She's my sister." "She is." He nodded again, then looked at me. "And you're still my mother." Those 4 words did something to my chest I can't explain. Not forgiveness. Not exactly. But inclusion. A choice. We weren't normal. We weren't simple. But we were here. And for now, that was everything. Summer came fast, like it always does in our town, suddenly and all at once. The scent of blooming roses wrapped around the porch rails. The hum of cicadas became our evening music. And inside our little house, a new rhythm emerged. Layla had found an apartment not far away, a second-floor walk-up with too many stairs and not enough light, but it was hers. She called it a beginning, not a break. She'd drop by for dinner once or twice a week, and sometimes we'd spend Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. She didn't call me Mom, but she called me every Sunday. And that somehow felt bigger. Drew was quieter still, more thoughtful. He started journaling again. Late at night, I'd see the light under his door and hear the soft scratching of pen on paper. Sometimes he'd leave the journals open, not quite intentionally, but not accidentally either. I never read them. But one night, he left a single page torn out on the kitchen table. It read, "Love doesn't disappear when it's rearranged. It lingers, reshapes, and waits for new definitions. She was my heart in one way, now she's my heart in another. And you were always the center." I folded it and kept it in my drawer. I never told him I'd seen it. We began to speak of things we'd never dared to before. One afternoon, as we sat on the back porch, Drew asked, "Why did you name her Layla?" I smiled at the memory. It was the name I whispered when I held her that first time. Before they took her, it just felt like her. "She kept it," he murmured. "She did." He sipped his lemonade. "Do you think we'll ever be whole again?" I watched a squirrel dart across the fence, unbothered by the enormity of our question. "No," I said honestly, "but I think we'll be better, softer, stronger. Not despite the cracks, but because of them." That weekend, Layla invited us both to her place. It was the first time Drew had stepped foot in it. She cooked. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a peach cobbler that was slightly overcooked on the edges. But we ate every bite. After dinner, she brought out a game board. Scrabble. She smirked. "You both always said you'd beat me someday." Drew laughed. really laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. The tiles clattered. She laid down the first word. Home. He nodded. Your turn, Mom. My hand hovered over the rack of letters. I looked at them jumbled, uncertain. But somehow from that mess I found something worth placing. And I smiled. Because in that moment I knew we weren't lost. We were simply rewritten. Fall arrived like a soft apology. The leaves flared amber and gold, and the air held a quiet kind of peace, not loud or dramatic, just a hush that settled deep inside your ribs. Layla had been in town nearly a year. We still had our awkward moments, still stumbled through half-said sentences, still paused now and then when an old wound poked through the progress. But there was progress, and with it came a strange, delicate joy. One day, Layla called me out of the blue. Her voice was bright. I want to show you something. Can you come by? When I got to her apartment, she led me to the small spare room she'd barely used. A mural was halfway finished on the wall. It was abstract, warm hues, blurred lines, but the center held a shape unmistakable, a mother's hands holding a child's feet. It's not done, she said, cheeks flushed, but it's the closest I've come to painting how I feel. I was speechless. She added, You know, I was studying art therapy before I left the city. I want to finish that. Here. That's wonderful, I said, heart swelling. I'd like to work with adopted kids. Help them explore their stories. I reached for her hand. That's powerful. She squeezed back. You gave me mine, even if it took a while to get here. That weekend, she asked if we could visit her adoptive parents' graves. They were good people, she said, and they raised me with love. I think they'd want me to share that. We brought flowers. She talked to the stones like they were old friends, thanked them, cried a little. I stood beside her, silent, offering presents over words. Afterward, we sat in the car, the windows fogged from our breath and the weight of everything between us. I don't have two mothers, she said softly. I have 3 chapters, and you're the one that's still being written. Tears filled my eyes. I hope I write it well, she smiled. You already are. That Thanksgiving, she hosted dinner at her place. Drew brought the wine. I brought the stuffing. We ate. We laughed. We shared things we never thought we'd say at a table together again. And at the end of the night, just as we were leaving, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a card. It read, To the woman who gave me life twice. Once at birth, and once when you told the truth. I didn't say a word. Just held her tight like I should have decades ago. And this time, I didn't have to let go. Winter arrived like a sigh. Snow dusted the windowsills, coating the town in silence. The kind of silence that makes everything feel sacred, even the cracks in the sidewalk or the bruises in your memory. One afternoon, Layla invited Drew and me over for tea. It was a soft day, pale light kettle humming, a record spinning somewhere in the background. When we sat down, she placed a box between us. Wooden, worn with a latch that looked like it had seen decades. I've been going through the things from the adoption agency, she said. Old papers, scans, letters. I found something you might want to see. Inside was a sealed envelope. Drew looked at me. I nodded. She passed it across the table. It was addressed to Baby L. The handwriting was mine. I hadn't remembered writing it. Not really. I'd been 19. Numb. But the second I opened it, it all came back. My sweet girl, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know none of this is your fault. You are not a mistake. You are the best thing I ever did. I'm scared. I'm young. And I'm not enough for you right now. But if life is kind, if fate is good, maybe one day you'll find me. And I'll still be waiting. I will always love you. Your first mother. I couldn't finish it aloud. My voice cracked. Layla reached over, hand firm on mine. I've read it 100 times, she whispered. It saved me during some really dark nights. Drew swallowed hard. I had no idea. You weren't meant to, I said gently. Back then it was a closed door, but now it's open, Layla said. And I want to keep it open. That night, I stayed after Drew left. Layla lit candles. We played music low, and she brought out a canvas blank, waiting. I want to paint our story, she said. From the beginning. Messy, layered, imperfect. Real, I added. She handed me a brush. Help me start. And so we did. 2 women. 2 pasts. One bond unbroken now, even if it had once been lost. The strokes weren't clean. The colors bled. But it was ours. And that made it beautiful. The mural took weeks. Every Sunday we added a new layer. Sometimes Drew joined watching from the armchair with a quiet curiosity. Sometimes he painted too, a stroke here, a soft blue curve there. It wasn't just art. It was restoration. One Sunday morning, as Layla and I were sipping coffee beside our unfinished work, she asked, "Did you ever think you'd see me again?" I paused, staring at a part of the painting where warm tones met shadows. "No," I said. "Not really. I hoped. But life doesn't usually return what it takes." She nodded, then looked at me, and her eyes weren't angry anymore. "I used to wish you'd come back for me," she admitted. Every birthday, I'd wait for a letter, a knock, anything. Then eventually I stopped waiting and started pretending. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face like I had when she was a baby, though she didn't remember it. I didn't come back soon enough. And I'll never stop being sorry for that. She didn't flinch. But you came. That same week, Drew invited both of us to his university showcase. He'd written an essay titled 3 Names, 1 Home. It wasn't about us directly, but it was. He read aloud on stage under a single spotlight. Family is not defined by who never left, but by who chose to return. It's not about perfect timelines or unbroken bonds. It's about the people who stand beside you knowing everything and still say, "You're mine." After the reading, we stood in the back of the auditorium. Layla reached for my hand. I didn't let go. Later that evening, we took a photo. The three of us. Not as a perfect family, but a persistent one. She captioned it online. "We were never lost. Just waiting." It went viral. Strangers wrote things like "Hope restored," and this made me call my mom. But we didn't need the likes or the shares. We had something else. Harder won. Deeper lived. That night, Drew sat beside me on the porch swing and said, "It's weird. I feel like I gained a sister and got my mom back all at once." I smiled. Life's funny that way. "Do you think things really happen for a reason?" I looked out at the stars. At this point, I think things happen. And we make the reason after. And sometimes that reason is love. Unexpected. Undeniable. And finally, unconditional. Spring came back slowly. The first buds peeked from the soil like small confessions. The wind lost its bite. And our story, mine Drew's, Layla's, began to feel less like a fracture and more like a new foundation. One evening, Layla brought over an old photo album from her adoptive parents. "I thought you might want to see the girl I became." "When you weren't there," she said. We sat on the floor, knees touching the album between us like a fragile bridge. There she was at 5, grinning with 2 front teeth missing. At 10, painting in a sunflower dress. At 16, winning a school art award. And at 18, hugging a woman I'd never met, her adoptive mother, with fierce, radiant love. "She was a good mom," Layla said softly. "She wasn't you, but she loved me in her way." I nodded. "And I'm glad she did." We flipped through each page like a prayer. And then Layla paused. "This one," she said, pointing to a picture of her about 7 years old, clutching a doll. "This was taken the day I started asking who I really was." "She looked so brave," I whispered. "She was lonely, but curious. And stubborn. I guess that part of me never left." She turned to me then. "Do you think I'm more like you or him?" I knew what she meant. Her biological father. The boy who vanished before she took her first breath. I hesitated. "You're more like you. That's the only answer that matters now." Layla leaned her head against my shoulder. "Good." That same week, Drew asked to speak with me, just the two of us. "I've been seeing someone," he said, slightly sheepish. "Oh." I tried to hide my smirk. "She knows everything. About Layla, about all of it. And she thinks we're extraordinary," he said. "Not broken. Just rewritten." I felt something uncoil in my chest. "Tell her thank you," I said, "for seeing us the way we never thought we could be seen." Later that night, I got a text from Layla. "Thinking of painting a new series. Called it Reunion. You, me, Drew, our mess, our love. Want to help me sketch the first one this weekend?" I stared at the screen, then typed back, "Always?" Because after everything, love wasn't just something we found again. It was something we built. Brushstroke by brushstroke. Word by word. The studio smelled like turpentine and lavender. Layla had insisted we start early before the light shifts. She said setting up the easel near the wide east-facing window. The canvas was blank. But we weren't. We sketched for hours, first in silence, then in memory. She painted her younger self a girl with wide, searching eyes and a paper heart taped together with hope. I painted her now bold, warm, uncertain, but unafraid. Drew stopped by mid-morning with coffee and croissants. He watched us for a moment and said, "You two should do an exhibit. Call it Unfinished." Ugh, I laughed. That would be very on-brand. But Layla nodded. Actually, I like that. That evening, she made an announcement on her social media. Coming this fall. My first public gallery. It's about finding the pieces of yourself you thought were gone and realizing they were just waiting to be claimed. The comments flooded in, but one caught my breath. A woman had written, "I gave up my daughter for adoption at 19. She's 30 now. I never stopped wondering. This gives me hope." I stared at the screen, tears welling. "You okay?" Layla asked. I showed her. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around me in the quietest, most sacred yes I'd ever heard. Weeks later, on the night of the exhibit, the gallery lights dimmed and our mural stood at the center. It wasn't flawless. There were uneven lines, mismatched tones, parts that overlapped in ways we didn't plan, but it breathed. And beside it, Layla had posted this: "She was the woman who lost me once and still dared to love me again." This isn't a painting of reunion. It's a portrait of forgiveness. People walked by. Some paused. Some cried. But none of that mattered as much as the look Layla gave me when she whispered, "Thank you for not turning away when I showed up." I held her hand firm and steady. "And thank you," I said, "for being brave enough to knock." Outside, the moon rose slow and full. And inside, a mother and daughter no longer lost. Just here. Just together. We stood at the edge of the mural, our shadows stretching across the floor like old ghosts, finally laid to rest. Drew took a picture, Layla and me side by side, not smiling for the camera, but for each other. A kind of smile that doesn't come from joy alone, but from surviving what tried to break you. "I've been thinking," Layla said, her voice quiet under the gallery lights, "about changing my last name." I turned to her, startled. "To what?" She shrugged. "To yours. Not because I need to erase my past, but because I want to claim the part of me that came from you." Tears stung before I could even nod. "I'd be honored," I said, "but only if it's what you want." She gave me a look I recognized, stubborn, clear, resolute. My look, my daughter's. That weekend we went to the courthouse, the same place I had once signed away my rights. I now stood beside her, while she reclaimed them. And as the clerk stamped the paper, I felt something close. Not a door this time, but a circle. Whole. That evening we held a small dinner, just the three of us. Candles, laughter, music from an old playlist Drew made in college. At one point he raised his glass. "To families that don't follow the rules," he said, "but rewrite them." We toasted with quiet pride. After dessert, Layla pulled out one last gift, a small hand-bound book. Inside were pages of letters, not from me to her, but from her to the girl she used to be. "I thought she needed to hear from me," she said. "From the woman she became." One line stayed with me. "You weren't left behind. You were simply on a path no one else could walk for you. And now, you're home." As I closed the book, I thought back to the day I first saw her face again, framed in fear, framed in disbelief. And I thought of today, the same eyes but shining now. Confident, loved. Our journey hadn't been easy. There were years lost, wounds reopened, truths neither of us were ready for when they came. But in the end, we didn't just find each other. We chose each other, again and again. And that choice was the truest kind of miracle. Some stories don't end with a bow. They end with brushstrokes, uneven, layered, honest. And that's what this was. I lost a daughter once. Not to death, but to silence, to shame, to the kind of fear that convinces a young girl she's not enough to be a mother. And yet years later, that daughter came back into my life, not through fate, but through love that refused to stay buried. She came back as my son's girlfriend. She stayed as my child. People ask if it was difficult. Yes, it was devastating. But it was also divine. It taught me that family isn't built only in nurseries or birthdays or blood. Sometimes it's forged in the fire of long-lost truths. And sometimes that fire makes something stronger than anything you could have planned. Today, when people look at us, me, Layla, and Drew, they see a family that makes no sense on paper. But in person, it's undeniable. Because love doesn't always look tidy. But when it's real, it returns. And when it does, it asks only one thing. Will you open the door? I did. And what I found was more than forgiveness. More than closure. What I found was home.